I started drawing as early as I was able to hold a pencil or a crayon in my hands. And my mother was an artist, and she painted all the time on canvas with oil paints. So I learned from her, and I started sculpting with clay and designing posters, and then I fell in love with type. And then somewhere along the way, I discovered that there are people that actually design the type and other elements on the screen for movies. So I started working with a prominent designer, and then I learned how to put my designs on film. Typesetting has a very strong impact on any viewer, any person who's looking at the film. They probably don't even know that they're being affected by it, and why. Through the choice of the type style, how it's arranged and set and presented, has an enormous impact on setting up the viewer for what's coming. And if it's done well, it can really make a difference. A good friend of mine who was a very fine sound effects editor and post supervisor of films he'd worked on was hired to supervise the post on Star Wars. And being a friend of mine, he thought of me when Lucas was looking for a title designer. So he brought me in, introduced me, and I was hired. And then I began working with George directly. Lucas had given me a list of films that he wanted me to look at, the Buck Rogers films and the other space heroes from the 30s and 40s, those serials that were on, that were in movie theaters then. And I looked at all that, many films as well, and then I started picking films that I wanted to look at, and amongst them was a movie from 1940 that Cecil B. DeMille directed called Union Pacific, and it was about the building of the railroad. And the opening shot is looking down these empty railroad tracks, and then from under the camera, the titles roll down the tracks. I imagined it in space, pulled by the Star Wars logo. So I presented that idea to Lucas, and he liked it a lot. He'd been rejecting everything else I'd shown him, so it was certainly a big win to finally get approval to do it. And though it looks very simple in its final form, it was so difficult to do because of the primitive nature of the equipment that I had to work with. Everything was on film, and digital didn't exist. It was shot on a big piece of cardboard that I set the title, the type, and each word was cut out separately and arranged on lines of its own. And we would tilt that piece of cardboard, which was huge, like 4 feet by 8 feet. It was unwieldy and it was soft, and we had to brace it and prop it up and so on. And then we pulled away from the artwork so that it was rolling away from the camera, and shot it, God knows, 20, 30, 40 times. Each of those steps I had to resolve and solve the design of it. Then the color, we varied the horizon line so it rolled down to a certain point, sometimes mid-screen, higher than middle or lower than middle, and then how many words per line and how many lines it would be, and the word breakup, and then the speed of the crawl. So all of those things were tested separately. And when I finally got a decision on each of those separate elements, I then shot it together. And each time I'd shoot a couple variations, and we'd develop this high contrast 35 millimeter film. And then the next day I'd view it and take it out to George and show it to him. I had to wait many hours and watch him viewing dailies of explosions and so on. But I still didn't know what I had and what he had and what he was after. So it was an ongoing struggle. Once that was approved, I was given the star field by the production. I then superimposed the titles over it. And that was then one day to shoot that. Once you had the elements built into the high contrast of the size, the movement, and so on. And then we filtered the color of the letters and superimposed it over the shot. I was quite happy with it because I proved all the variations and knew that it was the right speed, it was the right size, the right horizon, and so on. So I was happy to see it come together, and it paid off and delivered what I wanted it to be. And I was certainly grateful that he liked it and accepted it after the first take. I was never asked to work on the subsequent films. By that time, computers and motion control had been perfected, but they've never changed the design, both of the logo, of course, and of the traveling type. The wording changes for each of the episodes, but they stayed completely with what I had done originally. I'm still amazed at how popular it is. People tell me stories all the time of, they have to let me know where they were, how old they were, what theater it was. It's so affected so many people's lives in so many ways you can't imagine. And I'm still astonished by that. Although there's been many exhibits around the world, and I've spoken and signed autographs at some of the Star Wars festivals and so on, so I wasn't surprised that there was yet another acknowledgement of it. But that it's nearby to me and my work might be part of it, I was thrilled, and I'm still thrilled. I'm happy to provide some of the alternate designs that I did for the logo that would be part of the exhibit.